Pop quiz. Describe Ridley Scott's The Dog Stars in 3 words. It's nice, it's different, it's unusual.
We've survived because we have rules about how to deal with unknowns.
I know he has real coffee.
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and I'm an independent film critic who wants you to support your local library. What is everyone reading right now? I am currently reading Stephen King's Carrie in preparation of reviewing the limited series by Mike Flanagan. That is book number 71 of what I've read or reread this year. My full reading logs, by the way, if you want to see them, from this year and last year are available on my Patreon. We did a source material video on the Dog Stars here on my channel last year because all you have to tell me is directed by Ridley Scott, and that's it. I'm going to see it. Ridley Scott makes movies for the girls, Ferre, Armani, and Versace.
Ferre, Armani, and Versace.
I reread the book shortly before attending a press screening for The Dog Stars in order to prepare to see it, refresh myself on those details, and I am going to spend the bulk of this review comparing and contrasting the 2 versions of this story. The first part of this review I'm going to label with some spoilers, and the second part will be full spoilers because I think it's fair game to start to talk with a little bit more detail from the beginning when you are adapting a publicly available book. The main thing I want to get out of the way first, because there is an entire website that exists with this name, doesthedogdie.com. If you are one of my regular viewers, and you already watched my source material video on the Dog Stars, back when I published it last year, or at any point since then, you will already know that the dog dies in this story, but it is an incredibly important part of what happens. Whether or not a dog dies and how the dog dies can make or break whether or not some people will want to see a movie, so I am going to tell you what happens, and also, to be clear, I am recommending this movie, even as someone who doesn't like to see animals needlessly die in movies or series. In the book, Hig, that's Jacob Elordi's character, he takes his dog Jasper up a mountain to go on a camping trip together. It is something that the 2 of them have done together for years. Jasper in the book is very old. He's slowing down. He doesn't have the same amount of mobility as he used to have. Jasper in the movie, though, that's a movie dog. That's a dog that has been highly trained, has a lot of energy to follow the commands to fulfill various tricks and tasks that the job requires. As such, Jasper is not shown in the movie to be an old dog that is slowing down. Jasper in the book, he passes away at night, peacefully in his sleep, curled up next to Hig on this camping trip. Movie Jasper, none of us are going to believe that that dog is old and feeble, so it makes perfect sense that you would ultimately change how it is that he dies. There's always a threat of strangers showing up and attacking the home base that Hig has with Bangley, that's Josh Brolin's character. So during one of those attacks, Jasper is getting active too, because he's got energy and he can fight. That's how he dies, but it is done tastefully. You do not see anything graphic happen. You see the before and you see the after. And he went out like a warrior. If I can tell you that the movie's still worth seeing, even though the dog dies, you should believe me because I am someone that is very sensitive about this topic. Admittedly, I have had a solid year or so to sit with the knowledge gained from reading the source material book, so I knew all that time that the dog would not be surviving Act 1 of this story. But it's a tale that holds Jasper in high esteem, and they didn't do anything to the dog that was needlessly mean-spirited, like Evil Dead Burn.
Demon! I will kill you as many times as I have to.
Ridley Scott injects his signature high-octane action sensibilities into this adaptation of Heller's book. He also significantly improves on how important story information is conveyed and delivers a surprisingly softer, emotional introspection than what we've seen in his recent output. For further context, if you are new here, Ridley Scott is my bias, or one of my biases anyway. I went into this movie assuming that I would enjoy it, and I did. As I already said, I had read and reread the book, but I also know that when it comes to Ridley, he has zero hesitation with taking creative liberties with a story. In Ridley, I trust, so I was very open to the idea of Ridley potentially making some changes in the adaptation process. As such, some of the most intriguing parts of the movie for me as a viewer were the parts that were most different from the book. In particular, a lot of the action sequences were very different from how they happened in the book. if they even happened at all. What you need to know about Ridley is that if you bother him with stupid nitpicks, he will snap at you, and worst of all, he will be funny when he does that. Do you really want to be the person who said something needlessly nitpicky, and then Ridley Scott makes you look foolish, and everyone is laughing in unison because of that? Ridley Scott works like a demon, and that's something he has said about himself. He has a new movie out more or less every year, or if not that, every other year. None of your or my other faves have that level of efficiency, let alone at the age of almost 90 years old. I also found moments of unexpected comedy in The Dog Stars, unexpected in the sense that I did not find the book funny. It's not really that type of story, but it was also expected in the sense that Ridley is someone that has a dry sense of humor that I would say bleeds into a lot of his work, albeit to varying degrees. If you've made it this far into the review and you still don't know what The Dog Stars is about, it is a post-apocalyptic story. The world has problems that are similar to what we see in real life, climate crisis issues, and also there was an outbreak, though the details of how the outbreak allegedly or not allegedly happened in the book are not really the same in the film. It's not that they're different per se, but they don't really go into those details because it's ultimately not what the story in the film is focusing on. It's not about how it happened. It's about how do you choose to conduct yourself now that everyone is living in the after of these problems breaking out to the utmost severity. The main ideological difference is quickly established in the film through Hig versus Bangley. Bangley represents surviving, and Hig represents living. Of course, you cannot live in the proverbial sense if you do not fulfill the more fundamental need, which is to survive. But by the time we meet Hig and Bangley, they've figured out enough of a system to get by. Hig is the more sensitive of the two, emotionally speaking, so he feels the burden of all that's been lost to a degree that Bangley doesn't. As such, Hig is discontent. So when Jasper dies, he feels the need to try to go looking to see if something else, something more, is out there. Hig isn't an overly complicated character to understand in either version of this story. He is sad, grieving, and his loneliness grows far more intense after Jasper dies. Jacob Elordi, he understands this assignment, and he gets the job done. It's not asking him to do anything overly complicated as an actor, something vastly outside of what he's already shown himself to be capable of in other acting jobs. This is well within his wheelhouse. Bangley, I did not care for him in the book, and I also did not care for him in the film. On the one hand, I think they make more of an effort to give him an arc in the film in a way that he didn't have in the book. However, I still don't find him sympathetic. I didn't care about him, and the performance was uninspired. There was no range or depth to how he performed that role in a way that would have spoken to me. It was very flat. It was less so acting, and more so 7 pairs of furrowed brows stacked on top of each other wearing a trench coat. Margaret Qualley and Guy Pearce, both great. Seema in the book had a medical condition that made her more fragile. She would bruise very easily, and as a result of this, she was anticipating not living past the age of somewhere around maybe 55 years old, give or take. They didn't give her that medical issue in the film, which is a decision I can understand because it's Ridley Scott. He's going to up the action, and you want to let Margaret Qualley get to participate in some of that. If she could get injured as easily as the book version of that character could, you would have to exclude her from said action. Guy Pearce, what a diva. I need him in a new movie every year, actually. I need to see him on the big screen, annually. I rated Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey highly, but I would have rated it even higher if you had swapped someone out from that movie and put Guy Pearce in there instead. Out of everyone in the Dog Stars cast, the person I was most looking forward to seeing was in fact Guy Pearce. He plays Pops, and what I found to be immediately apparent is that even though on paper, Pops and Bangley have a fair bit in common, within the first few minutes of meeting Pops, already the performance was leagues above Bangley. There was a level of range and dimension and implied interiority that you could just sense was there that Bangley did not have. The most significant overall change that makes Ridley Scott's The Dog Stars work better than the book, overall anyway, is the way that information flows. When reading the book, it's written in a style that can often lean towards a meandering stream of consciousness. Dialogue is usually not presented in quotation marks. Spoken dialogue will simply bleed in and out of things that are in Hig's thoughts or his memories. I found it to be highly irritating to get through as a reader for the first time because of that. Reading it a second time was easier though, because by then I already knew the story, but I'm still not a fan of that writing style and the fact that it stays that way for more or less the entire book. When watching the Dog Stars movie, information is a lot easier to follow because it's a movie. You can clearly distinguish the difference between when characters are speaking their lines to each other versus when we're seeing a flashback from Hig's memory that does not involve spoken dialogue, but you can understand what's happening and how you're meant to feel about that. Overall, I enjoyed it. It was worth the year and 40 minutes wait, and I'm ready for the next Ridley Scott movie, or movies.
I heard a voice on the radio. My name is Hig.
I'm Seema.
Now I'm going to go through some of the comparisons between book and movie with more specific spoilers, so if you don't want to know things before you see the movie, that is your warning. The soft drink run we see Hig go on was different in the book. He ended up in a conflict or shootout with a couple of people who were trying to get soft drinks from the same spot as him. I think it was a truck. But anyway, if that soft drink thing wasn't already in the book, I would have been very annoyed at seeing so much Coca-Cola product placement on my screen. If you are not boycotting them, what are you doing? Haven't you read about what that company is doing in Mexico? No soft drinks from that company, absolutely not. You cannot have my money. Go away. It was a pleasant surprise, though, to see Ewan Bremner. Between Snowpiercer and now The Dog Stars, I just don't know why the global film industry is so determined to see this man struggling in a post-apocalyptic setting. But at least he got to keep all of his limbs this time. In one of the earliest flashbacks Hig had of his wife, there is a blink and you'll miss it Easter egg of the actual Dog Stars book being visible on the bed. I chuckled when I saw that. What can I say? I can find delight in spotting a good reference. Benedict Wong being one of the Mennonites was interesting. I don't feel like they had as much identity on an individual basis in the book, but it makes sense to put a distinguished actor among them in the film so that the audience has someone they can anchor themselves onto. The first time they had Hig hearing the voice over the transmission, or at least the first time that we see him hearing that voice, I instantly knew that it was Allison Janney because I would know that voice anywhere. Bratwurst? Aren't we the optimist?
Bratwurst? Aren't we the optimist?
There were a fair few night scenes in this movie, and I so appreciated how they made it very easy to see what was going on. Do you know how tired the audience at large is of watching night scenes where you're no longer thinking about the story you're meant to be watching, but instead you are sitting there wondering if whichever device you're watching this on needs to be on a different setting that will turn the brightness up? The fact that the movie version of Jasper's death is directly Bangley's fault, that was a turn I did not see coming. I already mentioned the fact that it does make sense to change the circumstances because a movie dog like that one has a lot of energy and is less likely to be convincing as a feeble older dog that is slowing down and needs help getting in and out of the plane. But considering that I am already not invested in Bangley from the book, I saw nothing to endear him to me in the movie's opening, or the movie in its entirety for that matter, because the performance, as I already said, was flat and one-dimensional. But if we focus on just how Bangley is at the beginning of the movie up until this point of Jasper's death, you changing the story so that it is now Bangley's fault is wild to do, considering that I knew they were probably going to try to have those two characters be good friends at the end of the movie. In the book, there is a nighttime attack that happens, and during that attack, Bangley lets Hig be the one to take out some of the intruders because Bangley wants to make sure that Hig has it in him to be able to go through with that because he sees it as a necessary survival skill before Bangley eventually does jump in on the action. However, the movie's circumstances are such that you have now made Bangley responsible for Jasper's death. I fully blame Bangley, and I wanted him to not survive this movie. I would have rated this movie higher if he had ended up in the ground. Goodbye, good riddance, good morning to you. Hig goes on his flight and ends up crash landing near where Pops and Seema live. They wait until the very end of the movie to have Hig and Seema fully decide to be together, romantically speaking. But in the book, they did start hooking up while they were still at their family farm. She even asks Hig for, let me not say it outright. It's something that rhymes with choral measure. Anyone seen I Love Boosters? A bit of that, if you know, you know. I was a bit surprised that Ridley delayed these two getting together until the very end because he's not exactly someone that shies away from allowing characters to engage in physical intimacy in his movies. Even recently, some of the funniest hookup scenes I have seen in recent memory, if you can even call them that, were in Napoleon.
Beautiful wife.
All right, come on then.
Imagine getting with a man and that is how he conducts himself. Ugh, I shudder to think. In the book, Hig is just living with Seema and Pops without this persistent focus on trying to continue flying towards this mysterious voice that he heard on the transmitter. Book Hig quickly finds that he likes living with them, especially with Seema, but shifting that dynamic for the movie works in tandem with this increased focus on making Hig have thoughts of not living anymore. He's deep in grief and depression, even if they don't use that word from what I remember, but his mental health isn't doing well in this movie. And understandably so, given the circumstances. It's the post-apocalyptic setting of it all. And surprise, surprise, living with Bangley didn't exactly help him in that regard, now did it? Yet for some reason, he needed to survive. Bangley needed to survive. In the book, Pops is the one who tells Hig that they need to leave this place, which Hig has come to regard as, I don't know if paradise is too strong of a word, but maybe idyllic, the best he's had in years. The thing is, every year the heat has been getting worse to the point that they now experience a drought. Some of their animals end up dying, and it's no longer a feasible option long term. They're able to make a plan to go to the airport Hig had already been on his way to in order to get more gasoline that they need to fill up the plane to make the journey back to where he came from. In the movie, it is Reapers that show up and force the trio to leave this place. They're in danger, girl. And thus, they must flee in the plane. The Reapers are chasing Hig first, and they're shooting at him when he's running through the cave. And the fact that they didn't look like they were that far away from him, and yet they still couldn't manage to hit him, all I heard in response to that while I was watching, it was the sound of Tiffany Pollard going, "And you missed!" And you can feel free to edit that together. The biggest action bits were the most significant changes from the book, as I already said. I know Ridley can deliver the goods when it comes to a giant action set piece. You had Bangley versus the group that looked like zombie skinheads. You had Hig, Seema, and Pops versus the Reapers who were riding on horses. And then finally, you had the giant fight against the cult at the airport. What I enjoyed about the first big fight we saw was that we actually got to see it happen. See, in the book, we don't see what happened to Bangley because the book stays locked and trapped in Hig's point of view. Hig was not there when Bangley was attacked, which means we do not see the showdown that badly injured him and tore up their home base. The second big fight, the one that happens with the Reapers on horses, that was a pleasant surprise. For one, it gave the story more energy and momentum. If they had just copied and pasted the plot from the book, the uninitiated audience that would watch this movie would have likely found it to be incredibly boring. This way, it forced the characters into action. There's more urgency to what's happening in that moment. The plane is too heavy to be able to take off when there are these Reapers climbing on the plane. Thus, they must fight them off. However, when the plane finally does manage to get off of the ground, it decapitates one of the Reapers. And when I tell you, I burst out laughing because that had some Sam Raimi's Army of Darkness, Billy and Hocus Pocus energy. It was such a surprise to see happen because when you're in the heat of the moment and you think it's just about needing to get the Reapers off of the plane, you would think that now that you've accomplished that and the plane is able to take off, you're done. Except no, you're not. We have one more little surprise. A little death to the enemies of the people of the Republic.
Death to the enemies of the people of the Republic. Hurrah! Justice is served.
And I was here for that. The airport sequence was very different. In the book, it was only one elderly couple luring people into the airport. Usually they would trigger a tripwire that would cause the plane to crash when it's landing. And if anyone would survive the crash and get out of the plane afterwards, they would finish them off then when those people are disoriented and injured. In the movie, though, it's a whole weird cultish front cars of the Snowpiercer train vibe going on inside that airport with a bit of religious peculiarities just for added flavor. And I loved it because it gave the actors more to do, for one. You got a bigger action spectacle out of that. It says something more about the way the worst people are coping in a post-apocalyptic state. I was thoroughly enjoying myself when we got to the airport because the fact that they were able to land the plane without narrowly missing a tripwire, I already knew, oh, things are going to be different. And then we have armed guards waiting outside. There are people lounging around inside. There's an entire surveillance security apparatus. I enjoyed every bit of this alteration to the material. Then, when they get back and they help Bangley, who is badly injured, but still alive, unfortunately, I did not expect them to move in with the Mennonites. That was different from the book. The quiet softness of the ending in the film lasted longer than I would have expected, but looking back on the full story in this film adaptation, it makes sense to do it that way. The film is a lot more clear in how it communicates the story and its meaning. There's that clear-cut presentation from the very beginning of differentiating between surviving and living, and using Bangley and Hig to do that. You reach the end of the movie, and you see everything Hig has been through, how much better he fared in his giant skirmishes with the Reapers on the horses and the weirdos at the airport. And do you know why he fared so much better? Because he had good people with him. You see how Bangley fared against the zombie skinheads? Not well. He barely survived, unfortunately. Bangley was alone. The movie is a very no man is an island, you should have community and connection, care for others, look after one another type of story. Not to be a textbook Eastern collectivist, but I do like the takeaway of the film. They're happier in the end and living a more fulfilling existence when they're all together. It's sweet, sappy, sentimental. Ridley the Diva Scott can be as hilariously curmudgeonly on his annual press tours as he likes, but that doesn't change the fact that he clearly has a heart of gold. And it's not unusual for that to end up in his movies, just like it did here with this one. I did a quick skim of Letterboxd while I was logging this film on there, and it seems like a fair few people don't seem to get this movie, and that's perfectly fine, to each their own. But as a person who has had Ridley Scott high on her film director's list for the last 5 years, gee, I wonder what happened 5 years ago. This and The Last Duel, back to back. And also as a person who didn't really like the book and how it was written, I liked this movie. And if you are handling the publicity for any of Ridley Scott's next however many movies, put me in, coach. Let me on the junket.
Come on, coach, give me one more chance.